Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. This will be a recap of New Jersey's governor election, which was about a week and a half ago. If you've not seen my review of the Virginia governor's race, it is out. Go check it out. But let's dive right into this race. So the bottom line with the New Jersey governor's race is it was way closer than any of us expected. And it really shows how much Democrats have really lost among voters as a whole, especially independent voters, suburban voters, centrist voters. So for those who do not know, New Jersey voted in the 2020 election. Biden won the state by 16 points, a very strong margin. Just statewide, Biden won in urban areas. He won in some traditionally Republican counties like Atlantic County. He won all across the state, in suburbs, in urban areas, in traditional Republican areas. And New Jersey is a state that kind of has trended Democrat in a weird way. It's always been a pretty solid Democratic state over the last 2 decades, aside for the fact that Chris Christie held the governorship from 2009 until he exited office. And in 2018, if we go back to 2018, Democrats flipped what then was, I think, 3 or 4 House seats in the state. Obviously, Jeff Van Drew, who represents southern New Jersey, did eventually change his party registration, ran as a Republican, and won as a Republican in 2020. But there was still Andy Kim, there was Tom Malinowski, there was Gottenheimer, who won, I believe, in 2016. There was Mickey Sherrill. So a lot of, the state on the congressional level definitely has shifted Democrat in the last 4 or 6 years. But in this election, we saw Phil Murphy, the incumbent governor, who's not so popular. New Jersey did have a similar COVID situation to New York. A lot of the same issues that kind of plagued New York throughout COVID plagued New Jersey. New Jersey is also a big state. It's pretty small geographically, but, it has a lot of people. It's the densest populated state, 14 electoral votes. But also, New Jersey has the highest state tax rate. This might have changed. It might now be California, but last time I checked, New Jersey had the highest state tax rate. And Phil Murphy's not, he's not a big name. He's not someone like Gavin Newsom or like Ron DeSantis. He's not a very well-known nationally governor. But people in the state have their opinions about him. Phil Murphy won in 2017 by a comfortable margin. Not a safe margin, actually. I can pull that up. Yeah, so Phil Murphy in 2017, it wasn't the biggest of margins, but it was a comfortable margin. He won by 15 points, or about 14 points. He did well in urban areas. He didn't do as well in some of the rural areas, but it was a big win. But 4 years later, it's a squeaker. And for a long time on election night, it actually looked like Chitterelli was going to win. He was performing very, very well in traditional Republican areas. In southern New Jersey, he ran up big margins in many of the counties. In Ocean County, the core Republican county in the state, he won over 2/3 of the vote. This is a big, big county. If we go to the New York Times map, we can just see how many votes came out of this one county, Ocean County. Also, Monmouth County, another traditionally Republican area represented by a Republican in Congress. And also in the suburbs. He kept the suburbs close, kind of traditional Democratic suburbs, like Bergen County, Passaic County, Somerset County. These were all counties, Burlington County, these were all counties that Biden won handily, that were close for Murphy. Chitterelli in some counties, overperformed Trump by 14, 15, 16 points. this was a big kind of rejection of Phil Murphy. But if we go to kind of who was Jack Ciattarelli, Jack Ciattarelli was not Donald Trump. Jack Ciattarelli was, a moderate. He ran on lower property taxes, stronger economy, law enforcement, rights and freedoms, combating anti-Semitism, affordable health care, improving education, clean energy. These are very traditional kind of Mitt Romney style, moderate center-right Republican issues. He's not, he is conservative, but, he's not conservative even like a Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin is definitely to the right of Jack Ciattarelli. And, this model of Jack Ciattarelli worked. And maybe if there were a couple more months in campaign season, Ciattarelli could have made up this 3-point deficit. I said that Murphy would win by at least 7 points. I was obviously wrong. Also with this one, polling got it semi-wrong. A lot of the polls showed, Murphy +6, +9, +4, +17 in September. So this race definitely, as we can see from the polls, did get closer. There were a couple, +1, +2. But, in October, there were not a lot of polls except for a couple that showed Murphy +4 that showed that this race was going to be at all close. So this was a win for Democrats, definitely a win, and Ciattarelli has now conceded the race. But it's actually a loss when we think about it in the context of the next election, 2022. Because, if you're a center-right candidate in some of these states, Michael Steele in Maryland, Kevin Faulconer in California, and you're running in a deep blue state and you're kind of a center-right moderate, you look at this result and say, you know what, I have a shot. There was probably definitely the Biden approval rating played into this state, as it did in Virginia. But this was a loss for and Murphy's not a he's definitely more liberal than someone like Terry McAuliffe. I don't know that I'd call him a very progressive person, but he's a liberal Democrat. And a liberal Democrat in a state that voted for Biden by 16 points nearly lost just a year later. I do also want to talk about this one candidate who miraculously won, or I'm going to go to the state houses. So in the Assembly, Democrats lost 6 seats, Republicans gained 4. Obviously, no major changes in Virginia. They flipped as a whole, but Democrats still maintain a majority in both houses. But when we go to the state Senate, it was Democrats only lost 1, but they lost Steve Sweeney, the majority leader in their caucus, and they lost it to a trucker named Edward Durr. And I'm sure you guys have seen this in the national news. Durr spent $2,300 on this election and upset the, Democratic leader who spent over $300,000 on this race. I'm sure Republicans are going to kind of milk this race, show, just an average Republican running against a kind of big money Democrat who won, who campaigned hard. He was edthetrucker.com. Actually go to this and see. But this was a stunner. This was very, very, very surprising. Very simple website, property taxes, limited government. This was a truck driver who upset the political machine in the state of New Jersey. It's a very inspiring story, regardless of where you stand. Edward Durr has made some very controversial remarks in the past. But, he is going to be seated. He, a truck driver, is going to go to the state Senate after defeating a, long-time Democratic incumbent. This is definitely an inspiring story. I'm sure this will be in kind of the national media. It'll be shown. Maybe Edward Durr will become this kind of national figure in the way kind of Sarah Palin was for the 2010 midterms. Who knows? But this is definitely a very surprising, almost inspiring story of just, how one man with very little money kind of flipped a seat. That being said, New Jersey as a whole, definitely a loss for Democrats, even though the Democrat won, because it shows that a center-right candidate can come into a blue state and, either make a big dent or even win. I don't know, maybe if this election was in 2 months, Chitterelli would have won. Maybe if Chitterelli had more money, I don't know what the whole dynamic was with this election, but, there was very little media attention on New Jersey. People were focused on Virginia. If this had flipped, it would have sent shockwaves through both parties. And this election should, even though the Democrat won by 3 points. But winning by 3 points as a Democrat in New Jersey in 2021, after Joe Biden won by 16 points, is nothing to cheer about. So we will see what implications this has to come. But for now, Phil Murphy, he's actually, another thing about Phil Murphy, he's the first Democrat to be reelected governor of New Jersey in 40 years, which is actually pretty interesting. But nevertheless, definitely a surprise election, an election that holds great importance as we go into 2022. An inspiring story with the truck driver, Ed Durr, and, we'll see if the kind of Chitterelli candidacy, a very center-right figure, will run in other blue states. That being said, if you've not checked out my Virginia video, go check it out. I'll be doing maybe 1 or 2 more videos on 2021. Then we will be talking about redistricting in 2022. All right, that is all.